Hello, Aries North Node, Libra South Node. Welcome to anyone and everyone who is interested in healing their Libra shadow. In this series, we are looking at all 12 of the zodiac archetypes and their shadow side. And we are doing shadow work in these videos, in these spaces, and what that means to me is integrating those shadows, right? The goal is never to amputate any part of our being. We're not trying to be less, we're trying to be more whole and more allowing and accepting of our tendencies to leave behind, our shadow side that may cause us to have a rough ride sometimes, where things bubble out in, I didn't mean that. I lost control of myself. Like, who is that? Why did they say, like when we just act, and especially for you guys, like where your impulse is one of the weakest in the entire nodal group as far as Aries North Node, like that's the whole point, is that what you are here to develop, what is least developed in you, is your North Node, your Aries energy, your connection to your own impulse for creating the life you want. And so I would imagine that anytime your impulse takes over and you go straight into action, that like it can almost be scary to come face to face with, I mean, there's a version of ourselves inside of ourselves driving us, and I don't recognize this self. Like, what? Like, that can be really disorienting, okay? To like meet some of these shadow aspects of ourselves, but that's what they are, is they are aspects of ourselves. And essentially, how I think about the shadow is a kind of comical way, is like, the shadow are the facets of yourself that you have locked in the basement, okay? And now it's like Thanksgiving dinner, and all of the pieces of you that are downstairs in the basement, they don't get to come upstairs and like eat at the table. Like, they're not part of anything. They're locked in the basement. And that's where most people have their shadow, is locked in the basement. And every once in a while, the shadowy ones, they escape from the basement and they wreak all kinds of havoc before we can catch them and lock them back in there. And that's where most people are in terms of dealing with their shadow. But like, I am specifically making this series for a very different type of person, as far as like a person who understands that having parts of yourself locked away somewhere where they don't get to be involved in your life, their wants and desires don't get to participate. You cannot keep any part of yourself caged for very long. It's gonna find a way to come out, and it's really just a matter of like, how smooth of a ride do you want that to be? So in my opinion, the people who I'm making this video for are highly realistic in terms of understanding that the best way to deal with the shadow is to integrate it. And the first step to integration is to face it full out. And that can be really scary. And so ultimately, I see this as like interesting. Like if one of those water rides at Disney where like you float through the place and it's got like the scene of like, it's a small life, or like whatever it is, like there's all these different ones. And like this one is one of those where like you're in the boat, you're floating along, right? Like you're watching the video, and I'm going to take you through some shadowy scenes as far as behavior that most likely you have come across at some point in your life, and most likely has held you back in some way. And that's not like a judgment call that society can make. That's more like you personally feel held back. Like you feel like there's part of me that's not getting a place in my life. Like the choices that I'm making are leaving some of me locked in a basement somewhere. And this video hopefully will in a loving way, kind of like one at a time, bring a shadow out of the basement and like give it a seat at the table, make it a cup of tea, give it a plate of cookies. Let it settle in. And then like see what it has to tell you, because the thing about the 3D, the thing about reality as far as like the tangible 3D realm, which I'll admit is not even close to everything, but in here, in the 3D, everything that exists serves a purpose. Everything that exists is a tool. And it's just a matter of, are you using the tool correctly? Are you a little too obsessed with certain tools? Like they say, like if all you've got is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And it's like, nobody's saying to like burn your hammer. We're just saying that like maybe sometimes like that's not the right tool to get out of the toolbox. Like that's not a nail, it's a screw. So leave your hammer in the box and get your screwdriver. And like none of that is a judgment on anybody doing anything wrong or anything like that. It's just a matter of coming back to how much of you is trapped in a basement somewhere. How much of you is not given a seat at your own table? You are the CEO of your life. And I mean that very specifically for Aries North Nodes, but I also mean it for like literally every single person on the face of the planet. Like every single individual is the CEO of their own life, is the creator of their own life. Every single individual is their own individual extension of God energy, of source energy. These are my beliefs. You don't have to believe any of this. But that's where I'm coming from as far as, okay, so because that's who you are, because that's who I believe you to be, is an extension of God, I don't think anybody should keep any part of God locked in any kind of basement. I think every single thing that you have locked down there, we could train it to sit at the table, and I believe wholeheartedly that that's possible, because that's my process as far as like, I just keep having to build a bigger table for myself and all the facets that just get like brought up out of the shadows, and like let them sit at the table, let them have a vote. Dude, they want stuff too. They're hungry too. They want a plate, like they like tea. But they snarl and they smell bad, and like my mom didn't like that part. Like, it also helps, like as far as like having a tour guide to like walk through these spaces together. It's like I also see myself as something of a bridge builder, or like a mediator, a facilitator, to not only wrap the you are right now, like you may resonate as having some of these shadow patterns worse than others, but like the you that you are right now, totally worthy of love and belonging. So that's step number one. It's like, yeah, you have this, you're still very lovable. Like that doesn't change anything. So number one, foundation of love and acceptance. And then number two, we kind of got to see, where does this come from? Like what even is this shadow? Like what is this part of yourself that you've chosen to put in the basement, and why did you choose that? Why are other parts of you allowed to sit at your table while these parts are trapped in a basement trying to make a break for it? Like, and sometimes they do. So why? Why these parts? And there's always an answer. You better believe, and it's probably kind of painful. It's like some form of social rejection, almost always. Almost always. And like Libra South Node is probably one of the most, I don't know, like Cancer South Node, Libra South Node, probably tied pretty close together as far as the most sensitive to social rejection. So like my heart goes out to you guys, because all of us don't like it when we get rejected by any member of society, usually. And what other people think of us is none of our business. What we think of us is our business. And what people's opinions got told to us or taught to us, or, they may have even been presented as the truth. not the person's opinion, right? Like, all of it was opinion, but they may have believed that it was the truth. All of that is information outside of yourself, and therefore, by nature, it's not you. If you can see it and experience it around you, then it's not you. And especially for the Libra shadow. Aries and Libra. Aries is the self, Libra is other. And so the Libra shadow is being hyper-focused on other. And to the detriment of self in general, but like how that acts is like, you know, Aries is our identity, our core self-identity. And when we are in our Libra shadow, we are also in the Aries shadow of not really having access to our identity. And if we don't have access to our core self, that's where our power comes from. That's like our source of source energy flowing through our being is coming from the center of ourself. And our core identity and what we're identifying with is opening or closing how much of our power we have access to. And so for Libra South Node, the shadow of that, of like overdoing the focus on the other, means that at the core of your identity is an amalgamation of several other people. And how many other people and who are those people is going to be different for every single Libra South Node, but some common ones that are in the mix would be your parents, your grandparents, teachers, friends from childhood, whatever culture you grew up in would be kind of like an underlying tone of like, that's what taught you what was acceptable. And so kind of that's the quiet, the quiet one that's often missed is like the culture itself had a lot to say about who you are. Again, none of that, it's all outside of you. So that's not you, right? But it had an opinion and often was presented as fact. And so that's kind of the tangled web of having all of these others. Oh, sorry, another really common one is your spouse. So like later on, choosing to marry, often if you're in the Libra shadow, you're going to replace your parents with your spouse. So like you would just go from that archetype being embodied by your parent, whichever one you had like the most issue with, as far as them being your identity instead of you being your identity. When you've not fully woken up into your Aries North Node, any relationships that you enter into in a romantic sense will be a transference of like whatever that parent's archetype was. You'll find a partner who embodies that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be the same gender for them to act just like that other one. And it doesn't have to even be like exactly, but like the feeling, the way they make you feel, the way, yet again, this person is the core of my identity. When I'm making a choice, I'm thinking about, well, what does this person want? What does this person need? What's important to this person? And again, that person is outside of yourself. So none of those questions are you and who you are. And that's not to say that you have to burn every bridge with every person you've ever met and just say, fuck everybody. You definitely don't have to do that. But, you know, Libra is the scales. And so harnessing the best of the best of the best of Libra energy is to create balance. And the only way that you can create balance is if you are properly represented. And so the Libra shadow on the Libra South Node is that there is no balance because the only one that's represented is the other. And it's like, dude, you can't. It's just sitting there like this. Like, I mean, they exist, you don't. And that's the Libra shadow that keeps so much of you locked in the basement. When you're in the Libra shadow of the other being your core identity, almost your whole self is what's locked in the basement. And so the thought of bringing the pieces out and to like, if you resonate with that as like, right now, the core of my identity is another person and I wish to change that. Number one, awesome work. Amazing, in fact. And it's possible, totally possible. It just takes step by step by step by step and keep at it. And like little by little, kind of like one step at a time, it's the scales will balance. Like as you bring more of yourself into yourself, what that means, and this is the part that the Aries North Node can be somewhat squeamish about, is that the more of you there is, do you see what's happening here? This person is like coming down and this person's like coming up, and like, I mean, things change. There's like challenging the status quo. There's raising potential conflict between you and the other person, because if you guys are equals and they want this and you want this, I mean, now you really have like something to negotiate, right? Like you have a decision to make as far as like, you know, how much do you value what you want compared to how much do you value the relationship? And that's a very personal choice. Nobody in the world can make that choice for you. So the potential for conflict to arise when you have yourself full of yourself, when you have your own unique identity, what that means is that you're unique. That means nobody in the world is going to be like you because you're unique. And so what that means is that you and every single other person in the world have a potential bridge to build as far as like a coming together of my differences and your differences, or you have a potential conflict to have of the differences between my values and myself and your values and yourself, right? Like when you create that separation of saying, I am unique because this is who I am. Myself is full of myself, meaning I am no longer like any other person on this planet. The potential for conflict goes through the roof, but that's where that fear, and I hope that this is what you see as we walk forward together through the floaty ride that this is. I am your guide. Keep your feet and hands inside the vehicle at all times. As we go through, I think you're going to see that it's not as scary as you think it is, because if anyone is built for diplomatically handling conflict, it's you guys. Like, you are some of the best conflict, like hostage negotiators, like airing out all the different sides of all the different perspectives and like keeping yourself out of it while you let this one take their turn and this one take their turn. Like, you are one of the most just, best listeners, most fair and equal in terms of the opportunities to be heard that you extend to every person included. And then your ability to take all of that information and square it against who am I and what do I really want. And one of, you know, some of the things that I think you'll find at the core of what you want is equality, justice, safety, protection for people in general. Like, I think you'll find that your heart is incredibly generous. And so if anyone should fill themselves with themselves, like, that means that generous heart has more room to operate, has more say on the decision-making process that is your life. Like, that generosity that is at the core of who you are, that causes you in the first place to want to keep the other happy. It's like when you put yourself at the core of yourself, you're not just keeping one other person happy, you now create a space where every single person in your experience can be full of themselves. Like, I think what one example that I'm pretty sure is in the Jan Spiller book, but I might be wrong about that, so take that with a grain of salt. But I'm pretty sure it was in the Aries North Node chapter where she talks about a man who really wanted to leave his wife, but he didn't have enough money yet, and that like he tried to keep her happy and tried to buy her stuff and like do whatever he could to keep her happy, and it just like was never enough. Like, the more he made, the more she spent, and it's like 20 years later and he's been like his whole life like not letting himself move on because he's trying to keep her happy. And if anything, she just got more and more and more and more and more miserable because she wasn't given the opportunity to create her own happiness, which she totally could have. She totally could have. She could have tapped into the sustainable happiness that belonged to her, but instead she was fed a steady diet of placation by her partner, her Libra South Node partner, wanting to keep her happy, like poisoned her with like over caring about her rather than kind of giving her space to be her own person, to have her own desires that like bubble up. And how is she going to make that happen for herself? He kind of like cut her happiness off at the knees. And so I say that because every single South Node, it's like when you wake up to the shadow of what it is that you're doing unconsciously and the fears that are driving you to do that, of like, you know, why is it so important to you that you keep this other person happy? And I think when you trace it back, it's because this person is your identity. And if they're not happy, they might leave and take with them my identity. And then who am I? What am I? Right? Like it's a very ungrounded, untethered effect. And there is an opportunity by exploring this Libra shadow to find, where am I, you know, not only keeping myself locked in the basement by prioritizing this other person's happiness over my own. How is that hurting me? And how is that hurting them? You know, like, is that really what's best for them? And that's a tough question to answer because it really depends on how you view pain and challenge and, you know, like conflict, disappointment, upset. Like typically Libra South Node like wants it to be harmonious. And like, that's it. So it's like, in the short term, it may not be super harmonious, but in the long term, you're actually giving space for even greater harmony to exist because it's more sustainable, because it's coming from inside each individual. It's not something that's given to one person by the other person, which is never sustainable in any context. So not only are you holding yourself back by keeping your true self in the shadows, but you're holding back anybody else that you're in a relationship with by not letting your true self come out and be seen. So that is just some information for your contemplation, as is the rest of this, right? Like I'll share my beliefs along the way so that you can compare to what you believe and how that might change the information that I'm giving you. But this is also me speaking from my own like boots on the ground, dealing with my own Libra shadow. Remember, we are all 12 of the zodiac archetypes, meaning we all 12 possess Libra energy. We all possess Libra energy, and we all possess the Libra shadow. So in some cases, every single person on the planet is guilty, if we can call it that, is sometimes choosing to prioritize another over themselves. Every single person on the planet does that at one point or another. It's just that Libra South Node is chronically doing that over and over and over and over. And every time anybody does it, you chip away at your sense of self. You chip away at your sense of self-respect. So every time you choose to honor your true self, you build your self-respect. And every time you honor another person's wishes and desires over and against what you want, you chip away at your sense of self and your sense of self-respect. So these are just choices. And the Libra South Node is more often than not really struggling to prioritize their inner self, building up their sense of self. That's essentially the work of your lifetime as an Aries North Node. So if you're interested, you'll see there's much contemplation here. Do feel free to take breaks, pause the video. Self-care, self-care, self-care. Cannot say it enough. You take care of you, and I totally trust that the divine timing will guide how you are brought to this video, potentially even on multiple occasions, to receive the next little bit that would be medicinal, would be soothing to the next layer of shadow that you're wanting to bring out. Because again, I don't want to under-report on how painful it is to bring the shadow out of the basement and sit it down at the table, because by golly, you rejected it for a reason. All right, so its presence is almost guaranteed to be somewhat upsetting and to bring up inside of you difficult emotions. And so this is not a sprint, okay? This is more of like a lifelong marathon of bringing your real self up out of your shadow. And I am honored to be your guide should you choose to stay. If you enjoy the video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you like North Node content, authenticity content. That's what we're doing over here. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. Would love to see you cheer on each other at down below, as a lot of you are working on the same things. And I would like to invite you, I am hosting or publishing videos on the channel that are me having a conversation with another person of all the different nodal groups. So I have a couple Aries North Node videos on my channel already, but I am doing more. So if you're an Aries North Node who wants to come on my channel and talk to me about your nodal journey, the way you see your South Node playing out, the way you see your North Node playing out, I would love to have that conversation with you. The link to show your interest is down in the description box. And without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so here we will dive in and take a look at each of the individual tendencies to leave behind that Jan Spiller outlines in her book, Astrology for the Soul. She has 6 under the Libra Shadow, Libra South Node tendencies to leave behind. And I've added 2 other ones that we will also go over, maybe more by the time we get there. But this first one that I want to talk about is debilitating selflessness. Debilitating selflessness. And, you know, there's 2 words there, right? Selflessness is one of the words, sure, but she didn't say that we're trying to leave behind selflessness, because that's ultimately one of the best superpowers that any of the Aries South Nodes will find that they have, is their ability to detach from their own ego. That's the beauty of an Aries South Node, is your ability to get selfless. So nobody's saying that we want you to let go of all of that, right? The tendencies to leave behind. We've said many times now that it's really not about amputating these things. It's about finding a right relationship with it. So finding your right relationship with selflessness. You know, there are times where your ability to check your own ego, basically lock it in a closet somewhere and let all kinds of people say all kinds of things that have nothing to do with you, and you give them the floor, you give them all kinds of open space, you give them diplomacy, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, you give and give and give and give and give to create this external harmony for the group. And again, we're in the zone of like one of your best superpowers for creating harmony in a group, and you do that largely through your selflessness, through your ability to not pay attention inside of yourself and to instead pay attention to the people that are around you. So that's beautiful, right? Libra energy, just like all of the other zodiac archetypes, is beautiful. When you look at its lightest frequency, when you look at, you know, why is that one of the 12 archetypes? Well, look at, like, where would we be without our ability to compromise and balance a partnership, right? Like, our ability to cooperate with other people and to find win-win strategies that work for everyone. That's all part of that Libra superpower. So again, like, part of this shadow work where we are putting these pieces in their right place is to figure out, like, you know, this tool, I said in the beginning, I think that, you know, when you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And this is a great example of that, where, you know, a Libra South Node's default position is selflessness, is to not exist. That, like, basically the core of the identity of the Libra South Node is the harmony of the group. And so the only thing that you identify with is the group harmonious or not? And if it's not, then what can I do to make it so? So that, I think, is where, you know, there's the first word of this one, the debilitating selflessness. Okay, like, that's where we have to find that tipping point where, oh, I see right there, and that's where I took it too far, right? My selflessness was fine, it was working for me, up until this point. And then you're right, I should have employed more selfishness, okay? Which is an Aries thing. And for more on how you take selfishness too far and how you find a right relationship with selfishness, you can check out the Aries Shadow video for an in-depth discussion on selfishness and self-centeredness. I describe them in two different contexts. So it's like an hour about how to be in the center of yourself and not take that too far, okay? Because like you guys, it's like like I said, your identity, your ego gets locked in a closet somewhere, and you'll go for like years without bringing it out and being like, hey, how you doing? How you doing in there? You holding up okay? Like you just let it ride and let it ride and let it ride. And it's like at a certain point, the debilitating part of the selflessness is that there's not a regular check-in happening with you. You know, like, yes, the external harmony of the group, very important, critically important even. Libra is a whole archetype all by itself. Like, balance and harmony between people is important, okay? And what you personally want, what your ego is whispering to you in the middle of the night, what your deepest desires, your heart's desires, you know, like your spark of life force energy was coming here for a reason, and it wasn't the harmony of the group, okay? Like that value is not something that we need to amputate, right? We can keep liking it when there's harmony, but the question becomes, you know, am I creating external harmony at the expense of my internal harmony, right? Like, does this group have space for me to be a part of the harmony that is being created here? Or is this group only harmonious if I keep myself, my real self, my ego, my identity locked in the closet? As long as I stay locked in the closet somewhere, this group is good to go, okay? That's where you've taken it too far. Like, if you don't fit there, if your real self is not coming to the group to be part of the harmonization effort between the group, then that's where it's now debilitating, because now you're in a place where you don't fit. You're in a place where your real self isn't here. And at that point, there's this question that comes up a lot in my mind. And I think, you know, I'm sharing it here for a reason, obviously. So maybe it's something you've faced a lot too, as far as, you know, you're talented at a lot of things. You can do a lot of things. You have a lot of skills. You have a lot of abilities, a lot of experience that will let you do a lot of cool stuff. And just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And I think the debilitating part of selflessness is where we jump right straight to this group needs to be harmonized. And again, we all know that you could do it, but do you desire to do it? As far as like, of course you could, but do you want to? Does your heart want this? Does your heart want to harmonize this situation because this is where you truly belong? Or are you filling the role of group harmonizer, which is very much that Libra South Node, like past life karma that you're bringing into this life, is like the debilitating selflessness of course you can harmonize any group because you don't even exist. You will harmonize with every single person you ever meet, regardless of who they are. Because you have, like when you have in music, like the melody and the harmony, like the melody sets the pace, the sound, the whatever you're doing, and then the harmonizer comes in and is like following along with what the melody is doing. And that Libra South Node shadow is very much about following along, like the debilitating part is about following along when this is not a match for you. Okay? Well, and the interesting piece about this is it's like, okay, so I think the natural next question then is, how do I know what's a match for me? Like, how do I know when to be selfless and when to be selfish, right? Like, how do I better balance these two things? And from what I understand from the Aries North Nodes that I've talked to and from what I've felt into the Libra South Node Shadow is like typically this kind of a pattern of debilitating selflessness ends in an angry outburst. You know, like ends with the volcano blowing its top. And it's like your inner child at that point, like having a meltdown, tantrum, fit thing that's like, I'm not doing this anymore. And like a little banshee ran your ass out of there. So it's like, it doesn't have to get to that point, you know? Like anger is really deep in the negative not meaning bad, but negative meaning like uncomfortable, unpleasant feeling side of the emotional spectrum. Anger is really deep in there. Okay? So like way before you're angry, you're going to be really frustrated, and before you're really frustrated, you're going to be kind of frustrated, and before you're kind of frustrated, you're going to be really annoyed, and before you're really annoyed, you're going to be kind of annoyed. And you know, like how bad does it need to get before you go to the closet and let yourself out of there, right? Like how offensive do the people around you need to be? And that is a serious question, maybe a little bit sharp, because again, one of the predictions I had for this Aries North Node transit that the whole collective is going through at the time I'm recording this, from mid-2023 to January of 2025, the entire collective is working through their Libra shadow. And the prediction I had was that, you know, if this is one of your dominant shadows, if you're somebody that is not bringing yourself into your dealings with other people, if your default mode is to harmonize with every single person's melody, no matter what, you don't discriminate, you just harmonize. So if that's at all what anybody has going on, what's coming is a really offensive monster is the word that's coming to my brain. But I mean, it's just a human. It's just a human who is really difficult for you to harmonize with. That's what it is like the act of harmonizing with their self. Yourself locked in the closet is having a friggin' conniption, and possibly even the volcano will blow its top that like, I can't do this, you know, like unharmonizable other one showing up, so that you are forced to break the habit of unconditionally harmonizing with every single person you meet, because not everybody deserves that from you. It's a gift that you take yourself out of the equation long enough to understand another person's perspective. And at some point in every situation, you have to be willing to put yourself back into the equation. And that's the part where a lot of times Aries North Nodes, like they live for a long time without themselves like ever being in the equation. And then they can wake up in the middle of some really tough, sticky, tightly knotted situations, mostly including other people, where they're like in it for the long run with all these other people, and they're like, I don't even like you people. Like when their true self finally comes out of the closet and is able to have a vote, it's like I wouldn't have voted for any of this, you know? So like that's a moment of disillusionment on the Aries North Node path, I think, that a lot of you guys Aries North Nodes have gone through, is recognizing that like I'm not even living my own life. And that's what the outcome is of debilitating selflessness, is like when your true self, when your heart's desire doesn't get a vote at your table, you're only operating off of harmonizing with the groups that you are already a part of and becoming part of new groups based on society and culture's expectations of you. For example, like, oh, I'm a parent now, I need to be part of the PTA. And now you're part of the PTA, and now you're subject to coming face to face with a whole group of people who, again, your debilitating selflessness shadow would have you harmonize with all of them and do what they do. And it's like,
eventually you will make your way into a group where, in order to harmonize with them, it feels like you're killing your own soul. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I promise you that's what it feels like. It feels like my soul is leaving my body so that I can do this with you, that I can be here and harmonize with this shit that like is so offensive to me. On the inside, I'm boiling mad, and on the outside, I say, yeah, that's fine. You know, have you ever been there where on the inside you are seething with contempt and possibly even rage about what is going on outside of you? And then it's your turn to speak and you're like, okay, sounds good. Dude, I've been there. I've totally been there, and I'm not even an Aries North Node. So I can't imagine that you guys don't resonate with that, but I would love to hear down in the comments like how that lands. So as always, it is not about, okay, you need to turn into a selfish asshole, like you're not allowed to be selfless anymore. Like, no, of course, like selflessness is one of your superpowers. It's one of your superpowers. And when it's time, you get that tool out of the toolbox and people watch you use it and they are in awe of how you do what you do. As far as like, how do you do that? How do you harmonize with all of these different kinds of people? Like, it's so impressive. And then, you know, you put your selflessness back in the toolbox and you get your selfishness out and you say, hey, my work day's done and I'm going to go to the gym and exercise by myself for 2 hours. And then I'm going to come home and I'm going to read my book and then I'm going to hang out with my friends. And then like you get your selfishness back out and make sure that you spend some time every single day harmonizing just with you. Harmonize with yourself. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be all day, every day. You don't have to turn into a selfish asshole. You probably couldn't if you tried. Let me just go ahead and try to put those fears at ease. Like I say with that Libra Shadow, like you could turn it up 100 times and you would still probably be erring on the side of not selfish enough, you know, of like giving other people too much grace and not giving yourself enough space in your life to have what you want. But again, it's different for every person. These are general videos, so take it wherever you're at on your Libra shadow path. I think that's all I have as far as debilitating selflessness. We're trying to leave the debilitated part behind, and in order to do that, we got to let our real self out of the closet at least every once in a while. Hopefully he gets some yard time every single day. I mean, even prisoners get an hour outside every single day. So come on, man, like let your true self come out and see what he wants. See what he's doing in there. You know, like what are your thoughts on this situation? What do you really want? And one thing that I do want to add on here as part of this is like, especially when you're early on working with a shadow like Libra's, it's like the thought of letting your real self come out and be seen is like, well, at the very beginning, it's like a total non-starter. Like that's the whole point of that Libra South Node. And when you're very first coming to be aware of it is that, right, like you have debilitated yourself by amputating your true identity, locking it in a closet, and the thought of getting it out is one of your deepest fears. So that's early on. And then it's like, okay, so, but like, how do I do that? How do I actually get it out? And the one thing that I would recommend is creating a solitude practice for yourself, where every day you spend time in solitude, no matter what, meaning nobody else is there to harmonize with except for you. And as you let your real self come out of the closet, you start listening to your heart's desires and you start asking your true identity what it wants in this life. Nobody else is seeing that, right? Just you. You're the only one witnessing it in your solitude, you with you. And, you know, the thing I want to say about letting out your true identity is that early on, you know, I think we tell ourselves that we're scared of what other people are going to think. And the truth is, this is my own personal belief, but the truth is that we are having an experience and we're putting other people's faces on it. And what I mean by that is that we're not actually worried about what other people are going to think. We're worried what we will think when we witness our own true self. Because the thing is, when you go to get your real self out of the closet, it's like not a perfect analogy because that makes it sound like there's a fully formed identity in the closet somewhere. It's not perfect because when you first go to dive into your real self, your real identity, your heart's desires, what you will find is that you're basically starting at square one. That like, it's not that you have to build that, but there's so much that's been covering it up for so long. Excavating for your real identity can feel a bit like a treasure hunt early on, where like, I don't have a map, I don't even know what I'm looking for. Like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing? So this is where I would say a couple of practices that I would recommend. I know journaling isn't for everybody, and so like you can do journaling like out loud. You could go in a room by yourself somewhere or drive around in your car and talk out loud to yourself, or you can get a journal and a pen and write it down. Either way, but I would say journaling is a great exercise. Even just starting with something super simple and that gives you a little bit of structure to kind of get you started is a gratitude list. Like when you start trying to pull from inside of yourself, what am I grateful for? I believe that that is one of the easiest ways to start to see who are you really? What is your true identity? Because the things that you personally appreciate will tell you a lot about yourself. The things that you don't appreciate will tell you a lot about yourself. I wouldn't recommend a non-gratitude practice. I would only recommend the gratitude practice. But often we find that we find our gratitude because I dealt with this person today and oh my gosh, she was so nice and kind and the way that she offered to help me was so cool. And like the only reason that that experience stood out with that person today was because that guy yesterday was like such a freaking jerk and made this one today look like an angel. I'm so grateful when the cashier is so nice to me, you know, like you can use the things that you don't like to find your way, to like follow the thread to what it is that you do like and what it is that you do want. What is your true identity? Not, you know, just a reflection of the person standing in front of you. The ultimate chameleon as far as like debilitating selflessness, it's like yourself is like this big. And so all you are early on in the Libra shadow is a reflection of the person standing in front of you. And you can see where we get to a shadow like codependence, where if all you are is a reflection of the person standing in front of you, how are you supposed to spend time by yourself? How are you supposed to be independent in this world and go after your own dreams, chase after what you want? Even spending time in solitude can be excruciating, depending on where you're at with that codependent shadow. So that'll be coming up later. So yeah, I think now that is what I have as far as debilitating selflessness and how to try to begin coaxing your real self to come up and out of the darkness of the shadows. So in this next part, we're going to talk about indecision, being indecisive. This is a very, very, very common Libra shadow. It's a common complaint about Libra energy in general is that it can get so dissipated in its concentration that deciding and landing on just one thing, just one facet, being able to make a choice and let go of the other one, it's just like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Like there's no tiebreaker. It's just like, I want them both. I want them all, you know, like the indecisiveness, just like every other piece that we have worked on in this entire series. First, I want to wrap it in loving compassion and explore where is that coming from? You know, like how does one find themselves in this part of the Libra shadow? And I think it has a lot to do with the depth of how much you care about other people, you know, and that's not wrong. Like, I have to say, like, if you struggle with decision making, for one thing, I'm going to tell a story here in a little bit that is just mind blowing as far as what's possible. I would say, especially when we don't rush to decisions. My story is beautiful as far as like indecision can pay off. Trust me, it's not all bad. And we'll explore how to get the most out of it, how to make the best of this shadow, how to have a right relationship with it. But first, I just want to say that, like, you know, the Aries shadow, when we talk on that end, we're covering things like selfishness and self-centeredness. And indecisiveness, I think, is the opposite end of that spectrum. And it's basically one of the ones on the list in Jan Spiller's book for the Aries North Node chapter is debilitating selflessness. And I think that's basically the condition out of which you would see a symptom like indecisiveness, where basically it's like there's not enough of you to weigh down the option that is best suited for you, aka like to make a decision. Another way I think about it, as far as like what even is indecision, it's like in selfishness, the equation is very simple. It's what do I want? And it's what do I want equals what I will have. That's like in my very simplistic understanding of what even is selfishness. It's a very simple decision-making equation where the only variable is what do you want? And that's what you give yourself. And so like that's how some people do it. Not in Libra South Node territory though. Like you guys are definitely on that other side where the equation that you are trying to compute to come to an answer, to come to a decision, to render it down to like, okay, what does this equal? And I'm gonna make up an equation or see if I can find like a really complicated looking equation like what I can see in my brain. As far as like this is what your decision making equation looks like. It's like, yeah, sure, what you want, it's in there somewhere with some kind of coefficient on it, but it's being divided by what's fair to the all and what does this other person want, and then it's like being squared in this variable that's like, what does tradition say about it? And then like you take it all and put it in parentheses and you times it by what culture expects of you. And it's just like the equation just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can't even stop expanding the equation, let alone solve it, to figure out like, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? What's the right answer? When you put all of those things in your equation, bless your heart, there is no solution. Like the computer in your head trying to make a decision is sitting there spinning like cannot compute. This equation has no solution, you know? And sometimes like we get so complicated inside our process that the process itself just kind of stalls out and we end up sitting there with no decision, just in the land of indecisiveness, in the land of the in-between. We sit there for potentially years, okay? And that's the story I want to tell you, is how an event happened in November 2021, which, if you'll remember, was the first Taurus full moon lunar eclipse of this eclipse cycle happening in conjunction with the North Node going through Taurus and the South Node going through Scorpio. The first eclipse of that was November 2021, full moon lunar eclipse in Taurus. The last eclipse of that, at the time I'm recording this, is happening in a week on October 28th. And it is also a full moon lunar eclipse. So we have kind of these like bookends happening here. And November 2021, an event happened where, long story short, without giving any of the details because it doesn't really matter, something died. A relationship died. And it was incredibly hard for me to process the disillusionment of seeing reality so clearly.
having thoughts like, this is not anything like what I thought it was. Like, I literally cannot believe what just happened, you know? And the cognitive dissonance of like, I can't even process what I just went through, let alone like, how do I move forward? How do I stand in my power in this situation? And that was November of 2021. And I mean, just to give you a little bit of the context of like, yeah, what happened in the 2 years since then, the first thing that happened was for 11 months after that, I did not interact with the relationship at all. Due to the nature of the relationship, there were strings that are attached whether we're talking or not. So there is still a relationship to come back to after 11 months of going non-responsive. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew for a fact I can't handle another one of those. Like, I say no to whatever that fucking was. And I'll just take my space. Thanks. Like, I can't tell you what I want. I can't tell you how to be different. I can't tell you how to be the right kind of human being. Like, I don't know. All I know is that I don't want any more of that. And that was the only clarity I had. And for 11 months, I worked through the experience that it was. And due to other circumstances, the two of us were brought back together in October of 2022. So 11 months later. And we engaged and co-created something at that time, which, like, given the story, it sounds really weird that I would choose to do that. Suffice it to say, and someday I'll tell a much, much broader version of this story where I actually give some details, but suffice it to say, it was the right thing to do because it let me get crystal clear on not only what I don't want, which I already friggin' understood that. I got that. It's that right there. That's what I don't want. But what do I want? You know, like, that part hadn't come into fruition at all at that point. At all. That's not really fair. I mean, I was doing things, but my grand vision that has like a freight train of momentum behind it, no, I'm not living that at that point. And now here's this other person inviting me to co-create this thing, which we did. And now that has been like a year ago, since October of 2022. And mostly we've kept our space and interacted as we've had to, very specifically about required things, and otherwise we've kept our space. And at this point, back up to about 3 weeks ago, and kind of coming into eclipse season, fall of 2023 now, you know, the Libra new moon solar eclipse happened October 14th, so like 2 weeks before. I guess that would have been the Aries full moon then. Yeah. So right around the time of the Aries full moon, I get the brilliant idea that, you know what, like, I'm sick of this space. I do have a vision. I am a visionary. I have so much to contribute. I have so much that I can see that we are capable of. Like, it is time to get down to business. Like, all of this space between us needs to be cleared out, and we need to work this out so that we can work together moving forward. And I get it in my head that in order for the space to get cleared out, we are going to have to rehash that incident from November of 2021, which neither of us ever spoke about after the day it happened. And really, like, during the situation, like, there was no apology, there was no anything. For 2 years, there was only kind of just like, let's just move past it kind of vibe. And I realized that in order for me to work with this person closely again, in order to accomplish the vision I can see, I need to express myself. I need to say that was a huge crossing of my boundaries, that, that was not okay, the way that he chose to vocalize his criticism of what it was that I was proposing. There was a lot that I needed to say about what had happened in that original incident. And I made that video 3 weeks ago today. And I had the understanding that maybe I send it to him, maybe I don't, but I need to say these things. I need to express myself. I need to tell the story of what it was to have my heart broken in that way to the person who broke it. I need to do that. Again, whether I send it to him or not, I need to tell that story. I need to express myself. And in doing that, in making that video, that opened the floodgates, I would say, as far as a level of me receiving love and healing over this situation, the thing that happened, it empowered me more than anything else, especially as I started to release him from, you're not going to hold me back anymore. I'm going to do what I can see that I can do. I'm a powerful creator and I really want to devote my skills to this thing. And that knowledge and that momentum and that desire, that fire that says I will have this, right? It was simplifying my equation way down. And the first step was that I need to clear the air. I need to say how he hurt me. And that sat there for 2 weeks, and it felt like even more grievances, we'll call them, even more little ways where no, in addition to that wasn't cool, and that wasn't cool, and that wasn't cool, and that wasn't cool, and that wasn't cool. And I just started seeing all of these where just like I did in the video, I let them all kind of come up and be wrapped in my own divinity, my own God self that knows that anybody else's treatment of you is not a reflection of you. It is a reflection of them. So if there are this many things that, aren't cool, is this really the person that you want to be harmonizing with and working with and partnering with in the first place? Yes, I know you already have a commitment in place, but commitments can be reworked, paperwork can be refiled. And, is this really what you want? Is this really what your true self wants? And I'm going to hopefully affirm how difficult this process is, because you would think that, at that point, I see all of these grievances and that tells me no, this is not somebody that I want to partner with. And I didn't see that. I didn't see that yet. I still was this is my partner. So this is the harmony that I need to create with this person. And it got me to this place where I realized it does feel good to let the past come up and out and be expressed again, even if not to the other person. I still got to honor that that's what I went through. That was the experience, and no, it wasn't right. No, I got to validate that for myself. And that felt incredible. And then it shifted to it still was this other person that I need to create the harmony with, but it wasn't so much that I need to tell him everything that went wrong in the past, so much as I need to be able to articulate point by point, what is it that I want? It's super easy. We call it the cheap seats. It's super easy to point out not this, not this, not this, not this. That's the easier side of authenticity. The harder side of authenticity is okay, so then what are you replacing it with? And what is it that you want? If you don't want this, then what do you want? And so a week ago, I wrote an email and a proposal on here's what I see for the future. Here's the essence, the vibe of where we are headed, assuming you can get on the same page with me. And at that point, I had it in my head that if they can't get on the same page with me, then I walk away. Like, I was kind of like, part of wanting to express myself was this readiness that, like, if they don't get it, then I'll just walk away, you know? But it felt necessary to express myself. It felt necessary to clear the air of my feelings. And then without needing to tell the actual person about my feelings, I was ready to, you know, paint this picture of what is it that I can see going forward. And in doing that, what I can see going forward, in the last week, like, it has gained like a whole freight train's worth of momentum behind it, and the exhilaration of it, and the clarity of the vision of it, and the knowledge and confidence that, like, I can do this. I can make this thing. I have the people in my life even that, like, will help me make this thing. Like, this is the benefactor. I can feel them in the 5D. Like, I mean, I had it all. It was like a whole package of, like, I can see that this vision is possible. And yesterday I wrote a resignation letter, and it is done. It hasn't happened yet. It's still, you know, unfolding in the physical, but, like, energetically, like, indecisiveness has come to an end. Like, I know exactly what I want. I want to resign. I want to dissolve this commitment. And in doing so, the version of myself that created that commitment and learned from that commitment, it feels like dissolving the commitment itself is allowing me to integrate every bit of nourishment the last 6.5 years have provided for me, and take it all forward into this vision of what I can see, of what I want. The decision has been made. And at that point, again, you'll notice, like, it has nothing to do with the other person. The other person didn't need to hear about my feelings. The other person doesn't need to hear about what it is that I truly want. The other person is just a mirror of, is this one the way you want to feel or not? And it's never about changing the other person. It's never about harmonizing with the other person, especially for Libra South Nodes. Like, it's the only way you're going to find harmony in life is creating inner harmony, harmonizing with yourself. And that's so much of what decisions even are. Like, it is allowing your authenticity to be embodied. Right? Like, in Aries energy, there really isn't even a decision to make. There's only the answer to the question, who are you? Who are you? And the who are you is basically answering the question itself of, what are you going to do? You know? And basically what I realized is who I am doesn't fit in the box that this relationship is. And that's okay. That's not personal about the box. The box is lovely. And me getting out of the box is opening it up for somebody who is box sized and shaped, you know, like they can't wait to get in there, and they're going to be able to, because I'm moving on to whatever's coming next for me. Whatever space is the right size for who I am right now. And I don't even have to turn in the resignation letter to know that this is over. You know, like, the decision is an internal process of coming into the solidity of who are you, and who you are is going to tell you what to do every single time, right? The things that are most valuable to you, the things that are most important to you will light the path that's already under your feet. Okay, like, indecision is standing on the path and spinning around saying, I don't know which way to go. And authenticity is the orientation, is the North Star, is the north magnet on the compass, is your authenticity. It tells you which way to point, right? It feels best when I face this way. And then you open your eyes, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, exactly. And it's like you can do it all with your eyes closed and with nobody else present, because it's all just a matter of what feels best to you. And I really want to take a second here and kind of sink into painting the picture now of why indecisiveness can be our friend, right? Like, you know, November of 2021, all I was capable of, which I didn't let myself do, but like all I would have been capable of is like a storming off the job, caving in, giving up, like fuck you kind of message. Like that's what I would have been capable of. And so instead of doing that, that's why I just didn't talk to them for 11 months. That was the alternative that I had available to me, was to be silent. Because if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. And the thing about Libra and that like over attachment to harmony, like wanting harmony kind of at the expense of yourself, it's like, it's the opposite of destructive energy. It's beautiful that you are that committed to harmony that, like, you know, pretty much anytime there's a conflict of some kind, it's like either possibly you could hurt their feelings and stand your ground, or you could let it hurt your feelings and you could cave into something that's not right for you. So it's like that Libra South Node is way more often caving into things that aren't right for them, letting yourself take the hit instead of anybody else having to take the hit. And again, I just have to stand back and your heart is so freaking beautiful. The way that you give of yourself for the harmony of the collective is stunning. And it's something that we're not trying to amputate off of you. And if anything, it's like, I think, again, that's where the Aries Shadow is very opposite, where on the Aries Shadow, you run the risk of burning people, like burning layers off of their body kind of thing, like setting them on fire, singeing their eyebrows off with how fast and impulsive and fiery you are. And again, the Libra South Node shadow, the opposite of that, what you guys got going on, is way more falling on the end of the spectrum where all of that burning damage is happening inside of you. It's like your real self is what's burning, and that gets more and more and more uncomfortable until it does clarify into place as far as like, who are you? The pain of not being able to be authentic will lead you right to where your authenticity is. And I wish it wasn't pain. And, you know, I think it can be pain or pleasure, because those are two different sides to the same coin. And all of it breeds awareness. All of it breeds focus in the here and now. And so the more you try to find your authenticity through pleasure, you lean into what feels pleasing to you personally, I think the more often you're going to find it through pleasure. And if you're not trying at all, then most likely it's going to come through things that are painful for you to have to deal with. And that makes you more aware of your authenticity. Both are on the buffet. You scoop whichever one you like. But at the end of the day, this Libra shadow of inaction, indecisiveness, what it means is that you give the situation, like this I think is master level as far as like harnessing the superpower of that Libra South Node. You give the situation time to find a graceful landing for everyone involved. And I'm going to describe a little bit how I think you do that. I think you basically do what I described in my story, where on the inside, you get as clear as you possibly can about who you are and what you want. And you don't involve anybody else in any of that as far as like the people in the situation. I will say, having spiritual support, both true spiritual support, like your angels, ancestors, your God self, like bringing that in, meditating or journaling from them to you on a regular basis, can't recommend it enough. But also earth angels that, you know, have been placed into your experience, people that draw you up and out of yourself, people that encourage you to get even more in your power, that encourage you to be even more of who you really are. When you take them like, am I allowed to be this big? They're like, you're allowed to be 5 times bigger than that. Come on, let's go. You know, like they are just this like energetic permission slip for your authenticity. Like I have a couple of those people in my world to where, as I'm going through this process of getting clear inside myself, inside this situation that I want, I am also, communing with these other souls who see my real power, who see my fuller potential, and who are encouraging me into that. So alongside having the intention for this situation to find a harmonious resolution, I'm building up my intention that I get to have exactly what I want. And I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that happens by making sure that I know what that is. Like you can't recognize it if you don't know what it is. And so let me put on the screen here a picture of a focus wheel. So if you're familiar with focus wheels, cool. I would love to know what you normally put in the middle. Some good ideas for what to put in the middle of your next or my next focus wheel. In the middle, you can literally put whatever you want. So this one is my life's work. And then it took me about 15 minutes to fill the page and describe what I already know to be true about my life's work. And you'll see that these are very general things. They're not, I'm going to do this step and then I'm going to do this step and then I'm going to do this step. Like it's not an action plan. It's very, very general characteristics of my life's work. And when you really think about it, the more general it is, the more ways it could potentially manifest. And I think the coolest thing about a focus wheel is that, I would do one like back in the day before I was an entrepreneur where like entrepreneurship, and I would like put that in the middle, and then I would write and fill in like all the cool aspects and characteristics of entrepreneurship that I was personally looking forward to. And that is really cool because a title like entrepreneur, that can take a while in the physical to come into fruition, right? Like it can take a while for that to actually be like what other people would call you, like what even is a title. Don't get stuck too much in the label is basically the point of the focus wheel. Because when you divide entrepreneurship down into like 40 different little pieces, you'll find that you can manifest almost all of those 40 pieces with or without the label of entrepreneur coming along with it. So this whole like getting clear on what you want, it doesn't have to be super specific to where the exact details in order to have enough of the picture, enough of the feeling of what is your authentic self. And what your authentic self is what it's gonna do, right? Like what comes naturally to it. I want to be of service. I want to answer fun questions. I want to be a role model for the new work paradigm. This is who I am. And you can claim these things in super general terms. And so again, like you have the intention for a harmonious resolution for all. You have the intention for, I want to get exactly what I want. And probably you have the intention that I want everybody to get exactly what they want. That's part of making a graceful landing. That's part of making a win-win-win-win-win scenario. And that, I think, is kind of the best way to summarize this superpower of indecisiveness is like, remember that very complex equation? Dude, like, what if I told you can actually solve it? What if I told you it might take you 2 years to like render it down into a solution? Like what if it is possible? It is possible to make a graceful landing for everyone else and yourself. But you'll see that, again, the only way that there's going to be harmony there is if you have this graceful landing for you too. If it's not graceful for you, it can't be graceful for anybody else. So you have to know, where are you trying to land? And then you get to decide, is it possible to land there inside of the context that I already have going on? Or do I need to close this context and build new context? Only you will know the answers to these questions, but it is possible. 2 years after the relationship died, here I am bringing it to a close that is graceful and that literally has win solutions all over it. And that's, all of this is energetic at this point. So technically I'm kind of talking out of my ass. I haven't turned in my resignation letter. I haven't actually moved through this process. Once I do, once it's officially closed, I intend to tell a full-on version, because through it, I have learned the value of indecisiveness, of patience, of not forcing a situation, which would be the shadow side of Mars, is that you just take the thoughtless self-assertion side of Mars, where this is what I want and I'm burning this fucker to the ground. What I would have done back in November 2021 had I allowed myself to take action. Instead, I focused that energy back inside of myself and had the base understanding already that, our authenticity comes to us in two ways, either through the things that we love or the things that we hate. And I hated that. I think my authenticity is in here somewhere. I think there's a new level of my power coming online in here somewhere, because I fucking hated that. I know it passionately. I'm never living through that again. I can tell you that right now. So there was a real sassy thing coming online over how offensive that was. And good. It gave me so much of my power to come across that experience. And there was no quick fix. Right? We're talking 2 years in the making, 600 some days in the making, 700 some days. It took a while for the massive equation to calculate itself out. But at the end of all of it, I get to walk away knowing that I made a graceful landing. And that is worth a lot in terms of our sense of integrity, our sense of self-respect, and knowing who we are. I'm somebody that cares enough about not wanting to bring unnecessary harm to other people, even if I was harmed first, that I would do the healing work for 2 years before I make a premature action. I'm not willing to act prematurely, because the stakes are high and I care about the people that I'm dealing with. So I am going to take my time and I'm going to get it right. At the end of the day, I will know when I move forward that I am doing the right thing. And that is the clarity that I found. Yes, it took 2 years, but is it worth it or isn't it? Probably it's worth it. And so all of this to say, do not ever sweat your indecisiveness. You let your process take as long as it takes, because always, we're wired for connection. Always the actions that we take affect other people. And you are the one that has to live with the way you impact other people in this world. That, on the day of our death, when we go back to non-physical, when we go back to the movie room, the review of what our life was, and we have to watch from non-physical's perspective who we were in the physical experience. I think Libra South Node, you may know the regret of not taking action, of skipping the risk and not really knowing if you could have or couldn't have, that, but you rarely know what it's like to truly hurt someone with your fire. Your impulsiveness, your recklessness is almost non-existent. And I think that comes from a deep love of humanity. And in that way, indecisiveness is really kind of beautiful. It's really kind of beautiful how you try to put everything in the equation. And all I can say is have faith in your ability to solve that equation. I think you can. And I think everyone is left in a more loving place, yourself most of all, by giving yourself the time to work through your indecision, to find your authenticity, to find your clarity, and to do what you know to be right. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining me here in the Mermaid Portal. I do hope that you have found it helpful. I would love it if you could leave a like on the video, leave your thoughts down below, comment or respond to somebody else's comments. I love watching how you support each other. It literally overflows my heart. Half the time, y'all say better things to each other than I can even think to say. So seriously, thank you for your service down in the comment section. It has been my pleasure, as always, to let this unfold in the timing that it was meant to. These stories were, I mean, the first couple chapters of this video were, I think, over a week or 2 weeks ago. And I'm just now getting back in here to finish out this last chapter, but it was absolutely meant to be part of this package for you right now. And it is my pleasure and my literal honor to get to bring these messages into the physical where you can find them. If there's someone that you think that would enjoy my content, I do appreciate you sharing my channel with them. Until next time, though, you take such good care of you, and so will I.